Right, good morning. Um, this is going to be a very different talk from the one you just heard. What I want to talk about is Leicester. I want to talk about the great work we're doing there, and I particularly want to get across the idea that we've got to work across lots of different disciplines because we've got limited land and we've got to get as many advantages from pieces of land in urban areas as we can. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Leicester. So for anybody who doesn't know, we won the Premiership. But just as there's another thing, I think it's safe to say that we're the only UK city to have found a dead king in a car park. It's it's in the top 10 cities in terms of size. I mean, obviously, once you go outside London, cities shrink a lot. It's about a third of a million people. I think it's Britain's first totally multicultural city, i.e., the number of UK. I'm going to get the figures wrong, but we're fantastically multicultural. We have a very strong mayor, but the issues that face us in the city are accessibility to green spaces. We've got an average life expectancy lower than the national average, and we've got some real issues about getting people out in the city for green benefits. We were Britain's first environment city. We still try and kind of claim the glory on what we're doing environmentally. We've got strong energy policies. We've got an active district heating program. We've had passive solar planning as a piece of policy for over 10 years. We've got some excellent flood policies, or rather individual site flood management policies that have been in place for quite a long time. 33,000 streetlights now have LED. So we're still trying to claim the glory on the environment city, but it's getting harder with cuts. I work for a city council, so there's a lot about policies, but we've got a lot of good policies in place. In our core strategy, we have a particular policy that means every single site has to look at managing its surface water within its site. It's not always easy to implement, but we've got it there and that helps us. We've got a climate change policy that includes water management. We've got a sustainable drainage guide, and we're currently working on some more guidance that I'll talk about in a moment. But we build water management and SUDS awareness into all our policies. So whether it's green infrastructure, biodiversity action plan, whatever, we're trying to mesh everything together. Flooding is a problem. A study of key weather events in the city between 2000 and 2008 showed that there were 102 extreme weather events. And the total cost, and I know there's other costs, not just money, the total cost of the council were nearly 4 million. And that included damage to highways, damage to trees, loss of rental income, etc., etc. The predictions are that we're going to have more erratic weather patterns. So in the 80s, there were lots of hard concrete flood channels built in the city. We can't keep on doing that. It's not going to solve the problem. So we've got to look at ways to manage the water and benefit the green infrastructure, and also socially, so that people understand what's going on and can become more flood resilient. So this is our city. On the left is a topographical survey of the city, and fairly obviously the higher land is around the city. Most of the city is in that central area, and there's a river called the River Soar that flows through it, and it takes the water off the Welland and upper Northamptonshire, and that all comes into the city. And you can see the flood map on the right-hand side. I gave a presentation to councillors once trying to explain why we've got to try and manage our floodwaters in the city. And I said, if we don't manage our floodwaters in the city, Loughborough gets it. And one of the councillors said, that's a problem? But it is a problem. We've got to try and look at where the water's coming from and try to manage it locally. So we've had a surface water management plan in existence for quite a while. And what that has revealed is you tend to think that the obvious flooding areas are near the river, but actually a lot of these blue areas that are called our critical drainage areas are on higher land. And flooding from surface water can take place because there are obstacles to the flows of water, so you end up with water backing up and creating problems in really unexpected areas. Now, we've built this into our planning policy, so when people apply for planning, this is one of the critical factors on looking at how strict we should be on making sure they put good localised infrastructure in. We're also lucky in Leicester for having a housing scheme that's one of the oldest to have had SUDs within it. It's called Hamilton. It features in Syria guidance. It was first envisaged to have a Swales system way back in 1992. The first houses started getting built in about 2000, and it's good for us to be able to go back and see and do peer review and understand how it works, what works well, how it could be done better. So we've got a system of 4 swale corridors. Some of them are very good, some of them aren't so good, but they take the water and they take it down to a series of wetlands at the bottom of the site before it eventually reaches the brook systems that then threaten the urban areas. So what we're trying to do is slow that water, hold it in these areas so that in times of peak rain events, we're not rushing all our water to the most vulnerable areas. So that's Hamilton. This is where I get angry. We shouldn't be doing this. This is so wrong. This is a former allotment site. It's on a slope like that. We've got impermeable soils. This is the open space. That's wrong. There's no way that's right. So, we've got to use some common sense and not build in problems for the future. The one on the right, it looks quite pretty, and I'm sure you could do an estate agent's photo to sell those houses. Do you know where the children play? They play on the road. That can't be right. All I can say about that is that the engineer who designed it is now a SUDS convert. At last. But, those kids are going to play on the road, and you've got 4 major headwall systems. You've got a totally rail green area. And, we've got a shortage of land. Would you like to buy that? 4 or 5 bed executive style home? 3-metre drop headwall in front of it. Future stagnant pond. Get a life. This is wrong. This is another scheme. It was a hospital car park, that one. And they were going to do conventional drainage. We got them to drain to Swales, create a wetland. They saved money. We got biodiversity. And now in phase 2, they're extending the principles. This is working with Eco. And this is a supermarket car park. And we have got supermarket car parks in the city with permeable paving. But in this particular instance, it was thought that there were problems with permeable paving. Lots of highway movements that kind of shake out that granular fill between the blocks. Women's heels getting stuck in the granular blocks. Any kind of somebody suing the supermarket isn't good news. So we've got standard blacktop, but what happens is the water flows across and that turquoise diagonally hatched area goes to a 10-metre wide filter strip, and we've used all sorts of proprietary products in that to make sure that we're upping the water quality. And then that flows under, and then we pick up the remaining third, which is fairly underused car parking because it's not the car parking adjacent to the main building. And that gets picked up by a narrower filter drain. And we've got these landscapes, which I think, that's a supermarket. There's a big picture over there. This is great stuff because we're getting biodiversity. We're getting cleaner water. It can be done. This is the largest green wall outside London. And we've got a green roof there. We've got 0.27 hectares of green roof in the city. It's a very difficult one to achieve, but we keep, when we get a scheme like this, we use it to tell everybody else how good these things can be. It's think it's the largest passive house construction in the UK. But this is terrific, and I think there's 17 different indigenous plant types used in this, and it's all designed integrally. You know, it's not an add-on. It was essential to the design of the building. This is something I feel really proud about. We have a city centre where you've got fantastically compacted soils, made up ground, all the rest of it. So we're starting to put suds in as standard. We've actually done some testing and found that a lot of these made up grounds that people said couldn't possibly support any filtration at all do support a little bit. And every time you can use something like that, it helps lower the dependence on traditional drainage. So this was our first ever scheme. This is called Applegate. And all this is a linear trench, and we use proprietary systems where we could afford them. Because I was having to make a case to the council as to why they should spend an extra £17,000. And they said they would spend an extra £7,000. So we did this as a test to see how it worked. So we filled in between with gabions, got proprietary systems here. The water flows down and then is collected at the end by a traditional system. But what it did is quite low-key, but it got highway design engineers excited about the principles of using suds in the city. So you start to get these mutual benefits. The trees and woodlands people are really pleased because at last their trees have got some space to actually grow. Traditionally they were put in manhole rings. So the one on the right I've included, it was still being constructed, but that was August the 8th. And a couple of years back, and it was a heavy, heavy downpour. And as you can see, where we've got our permeable resin bound, the water goes through. So there are other benefits to permeable paving in that you start to have drier streets. But we're now, as a council in the city, we're looking to do this sort of thing as the norm. It's nothing strange. We're now doing this as the norm. This is great. This isn't quite finished yet. This was the main highway. This is highway through to Montfort University, which is a city centre university. Now, what's going on with universities at the moment is they're all competing massively to have that edge. And with De Montfort, they didn't really have an edge. It was just a city centre university with a series of buildings that didn't tie together. So what I did, the initial kind of ideas, and took them through consultation, and then it went out to landscape architects. So we've got a green corridor now. So we've still got to, in the highway, we've still got to allow for emergency vehicles. It's closed off to normal throughway, but we've got to allow for emergency vehicles, cyclists, all the rest of it. So what we've got is a series of interlinked rain gardens right the way through, and it looks absolutely fantastic. Everybody's liking it, and nobody's realising yet that they've got suds. So that's going to be our next challenge, is actually explaining to people what they've actually got. But it's become like a feature of the university. So something that is drainage is actually the way they're now promoting the university. We are looking at, with the Environment Agency, the flow routes through the whole of the city. And what we're doing is we're trying to find opportunities as we go. So this was the first sort of scheme we did. That's theoretically amenity land, but there's a line at the top that had a very steep-sided ditch that took the stormwater off the A6 and rushed it straight into the River Soar. So you had a steep-sided ditch and you had pollution going straight into the river. So what we did is we've literally built a pond that holds 1,000 cubic meters of water, and that allows the sediment to settle. It takes cleaner water into the soil, and it limits flooding. This is, we finished off with wildflower, meadow, margin, and you've actually improved the amenity. You've actually improved the safety of that area, because the ditch you couldn't see. You could have just fallen into it. So from that work, which kind of tested how people would respond to big holes suddenly appearing, we've looked for further opportunities, and this is in the same area. The top shows potential flooding in this area. It's an area called Belgrave. Very densely developed terraced housing with very few open spaces. So what we've done is looked at how the water flows through. And what was happening was that that bump there was creating a bottleneck so that all the water backed up back into these terraced streets potentially. So we've actually taken away that bump, provided flood attenuation in this area. And just to stress, this is one of a series of schemes. And we've created 3,000 cubic metre storage of water, no, 10,000 cubic metre storage of water. Also built in some cycle paths, also some tree planting. So what was a fairly sterile, mown grass amenity area that people use for dog walking and not a lot else becomes something really attractive. And from that, we're building on the success of that in that the neighbouring development area, we're working on trying to encourage innovative use of suds, which will actually suit, that's going to be a research park, it will actually suit the sort of development that's going to go there. The big thing we're working on at the moment in this idea of trying to spread the knowledge is working out the barriers to developers doing better suds. Basically, if developers don't think they're going to get suds adopted, then why should they waste their time trying to do them? And if things cost them time and money, so what we're working on in the city is a technical adoptions guide for suds. So we've got this idea of water flowing into soft areas, then being picked up by ephemeral wetland type features, and then going into pipe systems. And we found out that Severn Trent wouldn't then adopt. So the county-wide SUDS group went to Coventry to meet Severn Trent, and we explained what we were trying to do. So we've got Severn Trent on board, and this is adopted now. So there's our principle, but here's our first example of carriageways actually draining into soft areas. Not built yet, but it's got planning. I talked about that one over there before. You can see the underdrain swale to the side of it. This is our big scheme. Again, we've got a wetland, and we were going to end up with some huge pipe going in and a huge head wall and a concrete apron. This isn't what we want to see with wetlands. We want natural spaces that people want to spend time at. We don't want to create areas where if a child falls, they crack their head open. So we talked to Severn Trent, and we're breaking it up into a whole series of smaller pipes, and we've got at-grade outfalls. So we've got something that looks reasonably natural. We've worked with our parks people because we're going to have to use our soft land to form storage for water, and we're going to have to talk to the people who are going to maintain them. So we've got the top there shows our principles, what we will adopt if they come in with that sort of thing, and below is an example of one of the pond systems that's going to be adopted. I'm nearly there. Here's another innovative one. So we've got a whole series of water holding areas. This one very temporary that can be used for informal play. This one stronger on biodiversity, and that one on our real water holding. We've actually got some rain gardens through the housing as well. So we're starting to get there. This is my last slide. It's very, very simple. But if you can explain to people what this water management's all about, and what we've done there is disconnected a downpipe, created a rain garden, but we've involved children. And hopefully, they're the future. If they can understand the principles, if they can get direct benefits, then that's what it's all about.